In the war room of the Echo Division workshop, the team was gathered, watching the live feed from the drone hovering above the woods. The dim glow of the monitors reflected on their faces, casting sharp shadows that mirrored the tension in the air. Gunnar stood with arms crossed, his cybernetic hand tapping rhythmically against his elbow, while Eli adjusted the thermal overlay to track the two intruders who had ventured far closer to their territory than anyone had dared in months. "They're still moving forward," Eli reported, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the room. "They know they're being watched," Clara said, her tone low and resolute. She leaned forward, studying the screen as Alpha and Omega appeared momentarily on the thermal feed, their massive forms flanking the intruders. "But they're pushing anyway. That means they either think they're clever enough to outmaneuver us, or they're desperate." "Desperation makes them dangerous," Malorian noted from his seat near the far wall, his elven robes stark against the tactical environment. His gaze flicked toward the wolves on the feed, his voice calm but firm. "But it also makes them predictable." The wolves prowled through the woods like living shadows, their movements swift and deliberate. Alpha and Omega had been circling the intruders for several minutes now. The second intruder froze, her hand twitching toward her weapon before the lead figure stopped her with a sharp gesture. "They're trying to hold it together," Clara said. "But they know something's out there. The wolves aren't just watching, they're wearing them down." Gunnar moved closer to Eli, his gaze never leaving the feed. "Can you pick up anything else?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate. Eli shook her head, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Their spell work is low level, barely enough to disrupt the outer wards. If they have a plan, they're keeping it close." "They've gotten further than they should have," Karina said, her arms crossed as she watched the intruders stumble over uneven terrain. Her sharp tone betrayed her frustration. "Whoever sent them knew enough about our defenses to give them a chance." "But not enough to protect them from the wolves," Shade added, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "They're determined," Darren said from his spot near the door. His smirk faded slightly, replaced by a glint of respect. "Stupid, but determined." The drone's feed zoomed in as the intruders reached a small clearing. Alpha and Omega circled just out of sight, their glowing eyes briefly visible before vanishing into the shadows. Gunnar's cybernetic hand rested on the table, his fingers tapping rhythmically. "Hold the wolves. Let's see what they do next." The room fell silent as the team watched the intruders, their breaths held in collective anticipation. The intruders' every move was a gamble, and the pack was ready to counter whatever hand they played. "They're thorough. I'll give them that," he muttered, watching the lead intruder crouch again, scanning for traps. "They're testing everything," Eli added, tilting the feed to get a better angle. "Every step, every branch. Either they're terrified, or they've been warned." "Warned about what?" Karina asked, her arms crossed. "We've kept the perimeter tight. No one outside should know this much." "Doesn't matter," Gunnar said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "What matters is how far they think they can get." On the screen, the thermal overlay flickered. The faint outlines of Alpha and Omega moved through the trees, invisible to the naked eye but unmistakable to the team. Their positions were perfect, just close enough to intimidate, but far enough to remain unseen. "They're good at this," Eliana said softly. Her gaze lingered on the screen, a hint of pride in her voice. Silent, precise, relentless. A testament to their training. "Not training," Malorian corrected, his tone calm. "Instinct. Wolves know how to stalk their prey without instruction. What you see is nature itself. Look at how they're still testing the wards." The lead figure had stopped again, murmuring under their breath. Faint magical energy shimmered in the air, pulsing against the invisible boundary of Echo Division's wards. The spell faded almost instantly, the wards holding firm. "They're probing, but they don't have the skill to break through," Eli said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Low-level detection magic. It's not even scratching the surface." Which means they're either amateurs, Shade said, stepping closer, or this is a distraction. Gunner's cybernetic fingers tapped lightly on the table, his smile growing faintly wider. They're not a threat yet. Let's see how far they'll go before they hit the real wall. You're amused by this? Karina asked, raising an eyebrow. Not amused, Gunner replied. Evaluating. They're showing me exactly where they think our weaknesses are. If they succeed, they prove us wrong. If they fail, we know we're right. Cold, Darren said from the corner, leaning back with his shotgun across his lap. But I get it. Let the rats run the maze. They're not rats, Maelorian said, his tone sharp. They are desperate, as you observed earlier. Desperation deserves vigilance, not mockery. The intruders reached a small clearing, their hesitant movements slowing further. The wolves remained just out of sight, their glowing eyes flashing briefly on the feed before disappearing again. The second intruder flinched visibly, gripping her companion's arm. They're nearing the threshold of the secondary wards, Eli reported. If they take another 20 steps, they'll trip the next alarm. On the screen, the lead figure gestured sharply to their companion, urging them forward. The second intruder hesitated, their fear palpable but obeyed. Together they pushed onward, unaware of just how closely they were being watched. 15 steps, Eli said quietly. The war room was silent except for the faint hum of the monitors. Everyone waited, breath held, as the intruders unknowingly danced closer to the line they could not cross. The wolves are just watching. They won't strike unless I call it. And what about us? Ashley asked. Do we step in? This is their move. Let's see how bold they're willing to be. The team watched in tense silence as the intruders hesitated at the edge of the clearing. The night stretched on, stars flickering above them, the air heavy with expectation. In the war room, Echo Division observed the live feed with unwavering focus. Every movement of the intruders, Argos and Evelyn, was scrutinized. The facility's expansive grounds and wards were under close watch, with Omega and Alpha silently patrolling the perimeter. Jules' drone floated above, offering aerial views of every shadow. As the intruders neared the barn, Gunner leaned forward, his eye narrowing. The soft glow of the monitor illuminated his face, the faint tension in his jaw betraying his thoughts. Onyx, Gunner's prized warhorse, stood in his stall. The black stallion was imposing even at rest, his massive form radiating restrained power. The faint glimmer of runes etched into his halter pulsed softly, an indication of the enchantments keeping his temperament in check. They're getting bold, Eli said, her sharp eyes on the monitor. Do they think they can just waltz into the barn and tame Onyx? Gunner shook his head, his voice calm but firm. They don't know what they're dealing with. The team watched as Argos approached Onyx, her movements careful yet curious. She muttered something under her breath, and the stallion's ears flicked forward. His fiery eyes glared at her, the magic in them sparking faintly. She's going to get herself bitten, Clara said, crossing her arms. The moment Onyx lunged, his teeth snapping inches from Argos's hand, a smirk tugged at Darren's lips. Told you, not just any horse. He's more than that, Maelorion observed quietly. His expression was thoughtful as he watched Onyx stomp his hoof, sending a faint ripple of magic through the barn. That beast is bonded to you, Gunner. Has been for years, Gunner said. Onyx has been with me since before the pack was formed. He knows the difference between friend and foe. Ileana's gaze flicked to Gunner. And yet you allow them this close? This isn't their test, Gunner replied, his tone steady. It's ours. Gunner's gaze shifted to the feed showing Alpha and Omega. The wolves were circling, their glowing eyes visible for only a moment before vanishing into the darkness. The sudden crackle of radio chatter caught everyone's attention. Rose's sharp, mocking voice filtered through the comms, her sarcastic tone grating. Of course, Darren said, leaning back with a smirk. She couldn't resist. Eliana's brows furrowed as she listened. She's not just guiding them, she's watching us. Let her, Gunnar said, his voice cold. She can watch all she wants. She won't like what she sees. Eli frowned, tapping a few keys to boost the audio. She's trying to keep them on track, but even Rose sounds nervous. She knows how dangerous this is. As Evelyn and Argos slipped out of the barn and moved toward the pavilion, Karina tilted her head. They're circling, trying to piece it together. They think this is a camp, Clara said, her voice tinged with disbelief. A camp. Gunnar's lips curved into a grim smile. Good. Let them underestimate us. Eliana's gaze lingered on the glowing pavilion in the feed. They don't understand what this place is. They see only what they expect to see. And that, Maelorion added, his tone heavy with meaning, is their greatest weakness. As the team watched Onyx settle back into his stall, Eli's voice carried through the room. If they'd stayed longer, they'd have seen what he's capable of. They wouldn't have survived, Clara said bluntly. Onyx doesn't give second chances. Gunnar's gaze was steady on the screen. He wasn't there to stop them, just to remind them this isn't their playground. Eliana's expression softened, her eyes meeting Gunnar's briefly. You've built a fortress here, but more than that, you've built trust, even in creatures like him. Gunnar gave a small nod, and that trust is what will keep us alive. As the intruders disappeared deeper into the compound, the team leaned back, their focus sharpening. Each movement, each step, was a puzzle piece falling into place. They're pushing boundaries, Maelorion said, his voice calm but resolute, but they're not ready for what lies within. And when they find it, Gunnar said, his voice low but firm, they'll wish they hadn't. The war room grew quiet after Gunnar's last words. The monitors hummed softly, displaying the intruders' every move as the team observed their gradual descent into the unknown. Gunnar finally straightened, his one good eye sharp as it shifted between Eliana and Maelorion. He crossed his arms. Eliana, Maelorion, I want to see how far they'll go, but let's see if we can give them something to remember. Can you create the northern lights? Eliana arched a silver brow, her expression both curious and intrigued. You want a distraction? Gunnar's smirk was slight but unmistakable. I want them to know they're not alone, even in the darkest skies. Maelorion exchanged a glance with Eliana, his pale blue eyes flickering with ancient wisdom. An aurora in the night? It's not beyond us, though its purpose must serve more than theatrics. It's a warning, Gunnar said plainly. A silent one. They'll know they've crossed into a place that doesn't obey their rules. Eliana nodded, her ethereal silver hair catching the light. It can be done. Give us a moment. The room shifted as Eliana and Maelorion stepped onto the workshop's balcony overlooking the vast forest. The crisp night air bit at their faces, the starlit expanse above unbroken by the moon. Eliana closed her eyes, her hands lifting gracefully as if summoning the sky itself. Beside her, Maelorion raised his arms, his movements slow but deliberate. The faint hum of elven magic filled the air, ancient and commanding. Colours began to ripple across the sky, greens, purples and blues blending into an ethereal dance that stretched across the heavens. The aurora cascaded like waves, illuminating the forest and bathing the workshop grounds in a mystical glow. Inside the war room, Eli leaned toward the monitor, her violet eyes wide with awe. That's incredible. Ashley smirked, watching the cameras capture the aurora from every angle. Talk about making an impression. Shade, standing in the corner, crossed his arms. It'll rattle them. They'll wonder if it's magic or just nature playing tricks. As the lights played across the sky, Gunnar turned to Shade and Karina, his voice calm but resolute. It's time. The chopper's ready. Take the trader to the holding facility and make sure this handoff is airtight. No room for mistakes. Karina nodded, her violet eyes burning with purpose. He won't slip away this time. Shade's expression was unreadable, but his tone was steady. We'll make sure he's delivered, and we'll stay until Homeland confirms his containment. Gunner's gaze lingered on them. Good. We're stretched thin as it is. I need you both back as soon as the job's done. Karina's expression softened slightly, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. We'll handle it, Gunner. Trust us. Shade gave a faint nod before turning on his heel, his coat swaying behind him as he strode toward the waiting transport. Karina followed, her steps deliberate, as if the weight of the past and present converged in this single task. As the chopper's rotors began to spin, Gunner stepped outside to see them off. The northern lights above cast an otherworldly glow over the landing pad. The trader, restrained and unconscious, was secured inside the helicopter, his breathing shallow but steady. Karina and Shade climbed aboard, their silhouettes stark against the pulsating lights. Gunner's voice rose above the din, firm and commanding. Get it done. We'll be waiting. The chopper lifted off, the powerful gust of wind kicking up snow and debris as it ascended into the glowing sky. For a moment, Gunner stood alone, his sharp blue eye fixed on the departing aircraft. Eliana approached, her voice soft but resolute. You've chosen capable hands for this task. Gunner didn't respond immediately, his gaze lingering on the fading chopper lights. I know. But every time we hand someone over, I wonder if it's the last we'll see of them, or if they'll slip away again. Eliana placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Not this time. As the team gathered back in the war room, the aurora still danced in the night sky, a silent reminder of the forces at play. Gunner turned his focus back to the monitors, his mind already calculating the next move. The wolves moved silently through the trees, their glowing eyes reflecting the shifting lights. In the distance, the intruders hesitated, their voices faint on the radio. Let's see how far they'll go, Gunner said quietly, his voice filled with both determination and forewarning. The war room at the Echo Division workshop hummed softly, filled with the faint glow of screens and the muted whispers of the team. Gunner stood with his arms crossed, his sharp blue eye locked on the monitors. The northern lights cascaded across the sky, painting the forest and compound with an ethereal brilliance. She's sharp, Eli remarked, leaning closer to the monitor. Her violet eyes tracked the woman identified as Argos as she blended seamlessly into the shadows. Not many people move like that. A little too sharp, Gunner muttered. His cybernetic fingers tapped lightly against the edge of the table. They're cautious but still pushing forward. Not amateurs but not seasoned operatives either. Ashley, perched on the edge of a nearby chair, smirked. The lights are throwing them off. Good call on that one. Clara, standing nearby, tilted her head as she watched the helicopter's spotlight sweep across the forest. They don't seem to know what to make of the chopper either. Do you think they'll retreat? Not a chance, Darren said with a grin, his arms crossed as he leaned back against the wall. That one, he gestured toward the screen showing Argos, is too stubborn. She's not leaving without answers. Eliana stood near the window, her gaze distant but thoughtful as she observed the shimmering aurora. Mylorion joined her, his expression neutral but his tone carrying an edge of intrigue. They're not just observing, Mylorion said quietly. They're probing, testing boundaries. Eliana nodded, her voice soft but firm. The lights weren't just a distraction, they were a statement. They'll feel it, even if they don't understand it. Gunner, overhearing, glanced at them. Think it'll make them second-guess their plan? Melorion's pale blue eyes flicked toward the screen where Argos was crouched, her sharp gaze scanning her surroundings. No, but it will stay with them. They'll question what kind of place can summon such power at will. The helicopter's departure caught everyone's attention. On the monitors, Argos and Evelyn froze, their reactions telling as they pressed themselves into cover. The camera feed shifted, showing Argos gesturing toward the main building, while Evelyn remained near the tree line. The two women's coordinated movements didn't escape Gunner's notice. "They're good at this," he admitted, his voice tinged with reluctant respect. "Not perfect, but good enough to avoid triggering the perimeter alarms." Darren chuckled. "Good doesn't cut it here, though. The wolves are watching, and if they get too close, well, let's just say it won't be a warm welcome." Eli tapped a few keys, pulling up data from the security grid. "They've managed to avoid tripping any alarms so far, but it's close. A few feet to the left, and they'd have triggered the outer wards." Aliana stepped closer to the screens, her silver hair shimmering faintly in the room's light. "Their leader Argos. She's skilled but cautious. She senses the wards, even if she doesn't fully understand them." Gunnar frowned, his gaze shifting to the other screens. "That makes her dangerous. She's not just stumbling through this, she's analysing everything." Outside, the wolves moved like ghosts through the trees. Alpha, his massive form blending into the shadows, crouched low as he observed the intruders. Omega followed close behind, his movements silent but purposeful. "They're watching, but not engaging," Clara observed, her tone thoughtful. "They know these aren't ordinary trespassers." Ashley nodded, her green eyes sharp as she watched the wolves on the screen. "They're holding back, waiting for a command. Smart." "Let's hope they don't give them a reason to attack," Gunnar said, his tone firm. "This isn't about bloodshed. Not yet." Gunnar stepped back from the monitors, addressing the room. "We let them keep moving. I want to see how far they'll go and what they're really after. If they get too close to anything critical, we step in." "And if they run into Onyx?" Darren asked, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Gunnar's smirk was brief but telling. "Then they'll wish they hadn't." The team chuckled, but the tension in the room remained palpable. The Northern Lights continued their hypnotic dance above, a silent sentinel over the unfolding events below. "We keep watching," Gunnar said, his voice steady. "They think they're testing us, but we're the ones running the test."
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.